and it was hell on earth. We got choppers coming in with rockets and all this other kind of stuff that's going on. I'm about 3 feet away from one of my buddies, and all of a sudden I hear this crack, and he had gotten shot right through the head. He falls backwards. His eyes are open. He's looking straight at me. And I am just speechless. I don't think anyone understands freedom like soldiers.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. On this episode, we hear the combat story of Dr. Clyde Horn, a former Army infantryman, Purple Heart recipient, and Vietnam veteran. He served in the 199th Light Infantry Brigade, fighting in the Iron Triangle from 67 to 68, and supported U.S. forces during the Tet Offensive. He was the quintessential Vietnam-era infantryman who volunteered to serve in some of the most dangerous conditions, only to return to Berkeley, California, to a polarizing situation in the U.S. After the military, he helped children suffering from trauma as a psychotherapist and has written 2 books on the veteran experience. Enjoy. All right, Clyde, thanks for taking the time to share your story.
Sure.
I've been thinking a lot about how to start this, and most of the people that I interview are from the Iraq-Afghanistan era. And so I'm well acquainted with what it was like 9/11 at that time, the feelings that we had going into that war, but I'm less familiar with the Vietnam era before going into that war. So I was hoping you could take us back to a year or two before you ended up in Vietnam, before you even probably had an idea that you were going in,
right?
To give some context around where you were, how your family viewed this war,
right?
The context around the country at the time, and how you viewed it going in.
Sure. Well, I was in college right when I decided I was going to go to Vietnam. But prior to that, I had been working on my own every summer to make money to go to college. My family was a military family. My father was a career Air Force soldier, and he was not real interactive with the family. He worked a lot. He was a ham radio operator. He did a lot of things. And also, he was a very angry man. And part of his anger came from the fact that he grew up as a kid without a father, and he was the oldest, and so he had to drop out of school and take care of the family and work jobs and so forth and so on. And he wasn't very prepared to be a parent, but regardless of that, he became one. And so what I learned through that experience was I needed to be self-motivated in order to get through and accomplish things I want, because I was pretty much told basically there was no way I could ever go to college. They just couldn't afford it and so forth. So regardless of that, I found ways to make money, and I hoarded the money away without them knowing about it. And I got a job at a machine shop through an uncle who was the most significant male figure in my life. He took an interest in me. He knew I was sports-oriented and an athlete. He was a semi-pro football player, and he was a dock worker in the Oakland docks. And his eyes would light up whenever he would see me, and he would take me for rides in his beat-up truck. And he allowed me to do some work in factories where he cleaned and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he got me a job at a machine shop in my senior year in high school. I made more money than my family made.
Wow. Doing
that job. And I was able to cover my first year in college. And also I had the GI Bill. when I came back from Vietnam, but not before.
Yeah, right.
So I went to college. And college was the same thing. It was, you have to study, but I also had to work. I worked 3 jobs going through college. I was young. I didn't care whether I got sleep or not. I was sleepy, tired most of the time. Anyway, at the second year, I decided I need a break. Vietnam War just came out. I'm going to make my contribution. I'm going to do it.
So what year is that?
That was 1960. It was right at the end of 1966.
Okay.
And then in 1967, I got inducted. I went in and did it without telling anyone.
Even your uncle?
Even my uncle.
Wow.
And then what happened was the family was in disarray, and they were shocked, and all that kind of stuff. And but I went.
And this was early, so 66 is early in terms of when the Vietnam War takes place.
Yeah, well,
what was
the
the
Vietnam War was already taking place a number of years before that, but yeah, and but it was heating up in that time. And of course, what I didn't realize is that actually when I got to Vietnam, we were close to the Tet Offensive and those kind of things that I also survived somehow. But the interesting thing about it was I went through boot camp very easily. I was an athlete. I just sailed through it. Mm-hmm. They sent us, though, from California, because Fort Ord was full, to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And I went to Tigerland. It was called Tigerland, the Advanced Infantry Training Group. And that was an eye-opener, even though it wasn't Vietnam.
It was probably the most realistic terrain to what you were going to find yourself in,
right.
I would imagine, especially compared to Fort Ord.
Yeah. And so all the training we did and all that kind of stuff was quite interesting. I learned that the basics, really, that every soldier learns. One is don't volunteer for anything until, unless you want to be known. And if you're known, you're in trouble. So, and when I got off the bus, they had us put all our clothes in a duffel bag. We got a duffel bag. The drill sergeants came and they said, dump all your clothes on the ground. We dumped all our clothes on the ground.
Is this basic training or is this advanced?
This is advanced.
Okay.
And I had a book on existentialism that I was reading. And the drill sergeant comes up and he goes, "We don't allow pornography in here." I go, okay, I'm in trouble.
You're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that was, and they didn't have, there was no rules. In other words, they'd get us up any time in the morning and take us on 10-mile walks, hikes, whatever. We wore our combat boots. We wore backpacks. We didn't have tennis shoes. Mm-hmm. We couldn't say no.
Yeah.
It was, you do it or you die. I mean, basically,
Were the drill instructors veterans at that time?
I could not tell unless I saw them in their dress uniforms, and a few were, but most weren't.
Most were not.
It was really interesting, too, because what I found out later coming back from Vietnam was that a lot of the people who did the teaching and stuff weren't veterans. They sent veterans. They sent me when I got back to Colorado to get in APCs and run around in the snow. I was a jungle expert. I mean, I could have really made a contribution. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, that's the way it was.
So just, I'd like to back up to something you said about. So you're in your first year of college, which you saved the money up to do.
Right.
You're working 3 jobs just to be there.
Right.
And clearly, it's important to you that you are there. So when you say that you wanted to do your part and serve, where did that come from? Especially if it sounds like your family was not
Right.
the same
Yeah.
mindset.
Well, I grew up with military kids.
Yeah.
And we didn't become best friends or that kind of thing. I mean, I had kids I called my best friends, but then we'd move away, and there was no way to make contact. They didn't have cell phones and stuff like that. So, and the phones at that time were third-party lines. They weren't just, you could pick up a phone and call anyone you wanted to. You had to compete with the neighbors and stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
So I really didn't have the connections that stayed through, lifelong friendships. But I grew up patriotic. I grew up realizing that the military made a contribution. I lived all over the world, and I saw us do good things. It wasn't just war. It was helping communities. It was building things for little towns and villages. I mean, it was significant stuff we did that empowered other nations, that helped the poor, and it also taught me insight that I didn't understand, consciously, but there was no prejudice. You were a human being to me. You weren't anything else. You could be a good person or a bad person. Didn't matter what your skin or your color was, what your religion was, or anything else. I mean, I grew up in that kind of that's where I think it took me later in life to understand how powerful living that kind of life as a kid was. Seeing the rest of the world, understanding kids from different cultures. As I became a teenager and moved to the South, I couldn't understand the South. What is going on here? Why are the African Americans in a separate dining hall from us?
Yeah.
And so I was like, what's going on? I couldn't, it was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
But it was what it was.
Yeah. Okay. One of the other things that I wanted to ask, because I remember when I was deciding what branch I wanted to go into, my thought of the infantry was heavily weighted in like what Vietnam looked like. And this was pre 9/11.
Right.
We'd had Desert Storm, but really I just remember hearing and seeing stories about Vietnam.
Right.
I'm curious, and in my mind, it's people in the jungle, kind of the way that I think your story plays out. What did you envision Vietnam would look like before you went?
Right.
If you can even remember what that was like, but did you have this idea of here's what my life would be like if I'm in Vietnam? Right.
Well, for one thing, I was not the gung-ho person. I'm going to go out and take,
Well, you had the existentialism.
I did. So. Yeah. But I also felt like, I mean, at that time, I believed that Vietnam was not a civil war. I thought that truly, if Vietnam was taken over by the communists, that they would really look at taking over all of Southeast Asia. Still, part of me believes that this day. And so I thought politically that was a good move on my part as well, to make a contribution to democracy in a place that was being taken over that didn't want to be taken over. Although, there was corrupt stuff going on both sides, the North and the South. But regardless of that kind of helped motivate my thinking in terms of why I wanted to be involved in it. And I wanted to be part of the military that fought, not part of the military that was an infrastructure. As valuable as I think the infrastructure was, we needed that as much as we did the combat stuff. So, yeah.
What made you want to be in the combat arms side? Is that the athleticism background?
I think so. I also kind of wanted to see what it was like. I had no clue. You see war movies and stuff like that. I didn't believe them. But, but I thought, I can't put words to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just there in me.
And your vision of an infantryman at the time, was it pretty accurate to what you ended up experiencing, or was it more based on what you had seen or heard from Korea, World War II? What did that, in your mind before you went?
Well, for one thing, it was nothing like I had thought in my mind, You just cannot imagine the danger until you're in it. You just can't. It's not even comprehensible for me to try to give some rational explanation to it. It is so mind-boggling and so traumatic in terms of your first experiences of what's going on. And my mantra became from not the first day, but after I got into combat. Because first day we just landed in Vietnam, they took us through indoctrination and gave us our weapons and all that kind of stuff, then assigned us to units. And then we went into the field. But it was the mantra was, I'm going to wake up, and my mantra is, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. I said it 3 times to myself every day.
Every day when you woke up?
Every day when I woke up. Because I was seeing so much death. I was seeing so many people die. And in my unit, some of the people that I saw die told me that they were going to die.
Wow.
And even though I tried to talk them out of that kind of thinking, you're being negative, you're setting yourself up, to do something you shouldn't do, and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
They didn't hear it.
No. So this is a great segue into combat. I want to touch real quickly on the amount of training you had before you went in. So you did basic, you did advanced at Polk. How many weeks are we talking at that point in time? Because that's 66, getting you set to go in 67.
Yeah.
They needed to get people in.
Right.
So how much training did you feel you got? What was it like?
Well, I think it was 4 months of training.
4 months.
Between the two, basic and advanced infantry. I don't think the training meant anything. Well, that's not true. It taught me about weapons and how to use weapons and all those kind of things, but it did not in any way prepare me for what I was going to learn on my own.
Mm-hmm.
How to be aware and focused on where a tripwire might be.
Yeah.
How to set up a claymore mine. How to listen in certain ways for the way nature changes sounds.
Mm-hmm.
All those kind of subtleties that you don't think about in general.
Okay. Yeah. So it's almost, it doesn't matter if you had 7 months.
That's right.
Because really, it wasn't geared towards what you were about to get into at that time.
It was information, and it was good information, but that was,
Yeah. So let's then transition into you going into combat. And before we do that, I know you were in the Iron Triangle.
Right.
So I wanted to take a moment to make sure that we can scope out where that was.
Right.
And then also, I think probably depending on when you arrived, and I want to talk about that, but you were in the Tet Offensive effectively. So also a description of when that hit in your tour, because that certainly played a significant role in your experience there. So if we start out with the Iron Triangle, my understanding it's north of Saigon.
Right.
That's kind of the southernmost boundary.
Yeah.
Saigon River is kind of the western boundary.
Right.
And then the Tin River maybe on the eastern side.
Mm-hmm.
And that triangle is effectively held by the Viet Minh in both that war with the French. That was a stronghold for them.
Yeah.
Does that sound? And please feel free to provide more context.
No, that's correct. I mean, one of the interesting things is they did not want any of us who were enlisted to know anything. Where in some units, they let you know where you were going and you could look at the maps. I only looked at maps when we were out on ambushes.
Wow.
And so I had to kind of guess where we were by the way the Hueys were flying us, and later I confirmed it, that we were in the Iron Triangle. And we were in the part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that came down into the south. And so all of the infrastructure that they'd built up with the French was still in place. So they had bunker complexes, they had tunnel complexes, they had all that kind of stuff there. And that solved a mystery for me is, where did they go?
Yeah.
They were gone. You're there, you're fighting, and and then you're bringing in extra forces to support you, and they're gone. And very rarely did we ever find a dead soldier.
Wow. Yeah. So that's the Iron Triangle, and that's,
Right.
I think, where a lot of what we're about to talk about
Yeah.
takes place. And then, if I understand it correctly, is it about halfway through your tour, the Tet Offensive begins in January of
Right.
68? Is that right?
Yeah, maybe a little bit longer than half. I was wounded in December of 66. And
67 or 66?
67.
67, right.
You're right, 67. And then after that, the Tet Offensive. So.
All right, so let's back to what you had mentioned. You kind of arrive in Vietnam, you go through indoctrination, you're assigned your weapons. You're then assigned to the 199th, right? Light Infantry.
Yes.
Based out of the Saigon area?
It was the main base in Saigon. You know what? I'm blocking the name.
Well, I'll add it later. We can put this in.
Yeah.
Could you talk to me about the rotation cycle you were on, and then the first time you actually go into a mission?
Sure. We began for about a month and a half being sent out around Saigon on the rice paddy dikes, looking for any signs of Viet Cong activity. And so we walked the dikes, and that's where I learned booby trap expertise. And we had German shepherds that were used as points that would sniff out, and if they didn't sniff out, they were blown up. So, by virtue of walking in swamps as well as the rice paddies, sometimes you couldn't walk on the dikes; you had to walk in the rice paddies. You had to look for glint for the sun bouncing off certain things, and then you also had to look for something that was not natural to the environment. And so it didn't take me long.
Yeah.
Besides that, we had experienced people that were going to rotate out that were saying, okay, watch this, look there, focus over this direction, and that kind of stuff. In the mix of that, we had people that were just sloppy. It's a great day, soldier, the rifle over the soldier shoulder, and and it didn't take me long to know, don't be around people like that.
Yeah. So do you recall even your first patrol that you went out on? And
I do.
How did that feel? Like, this is your first experience in combat, right?
Well, they get you to cluster up in a. We would go out as a whole company, but generally we'd cluster up in squads, and so you'd cluster up in a squad, and then you would wait for maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours for a chopper to come pick you up to take you out there. So the anticipation was almost choking the first few times I went
It wouldn't
out.
be the Army if you didn't have to wait.
No.
So you want to make sure you got the full experience.
Absolutely.
Right.
There was never an explanation. It's sort of like the airlines today. There's never an explanation why there's a delay, So
But basically, you're sitting there. The squad is what? Is it about 8 people?
8 people.
You're just waiting.
It could
You're
be
just waiting.
because the squad would generally fill up one chopper.
Yeah.
And so you would sit on a chopper with your feet hanging out, and clustered in together and stuff. So the anticipation was really anxiety provoking. We would all be sweating, and we'd be laughing about some joke somebody would make or whatever, or this is like the Army. Yeah, let's moo like cows. I mean, all the kind of stuff you do in the Army. And we'd just be silly, and goofy.
And you remember sitting there for that first movement?
Yeah. You better believe I do.
What was going through your head?
I wonder if I'm going to live today.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even been in combat.
Right.
Yeah, and so when we did get on the chopper, it was an experience being on a chopper, and it comes, takes off, and it's just going like crazy, and you're just going, wow, and you're seeing underneath you and everything else. And when we come to the LZ and we land, I had about 2 weeks to 3 weeks of shooting mortars from when we'd set up in the LZ area. And then the rest of the group would go out into the jungle.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I was a mortarman.
So when your first experience was you get in, you stay at the LZ,
right.
and you were receiving the radio calls for mortar fire?
Right.
And it's you and how many people with you there?
I had three guys. I was the head mortarman, and then we had one guy that would put in the
wow.
Yeah, bullets and stuff.
So that was 2 to 3 weeks. That was your
3
first
weeks, yeah.
And were you firing mortars during that time?
I was, because we had large open areas that we would bunker in, and they'd come out of the jungle and bunker in the bunkers. And of course, we had to dig out the bunkers, so it's not like
yeah.
Yeah. And then we set up a perimeter with the safety zone and that kind of stuff. And so we were generally shooting mortars a little left to where, or a little right to where the patrols were going. And you never knew what you were hitting or not.
No.
Yeah.
But you were getting radio calls in for the direction.
We'd get radio
adjustments.
calls in, we'd get adjustments, or sometimes we would have officers, whatever, flying over in chopper and say, shoot in this direction or that direction,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah. So give us.
And so, if I understand correctly, you guys are out in enemy territory.
Right.
You've got 4 people,
Right.
and you have to somehow protect yourself and run ops whenever you get a call in for 3 weeks.
Well, we did have a radio man too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're in a single location.
Yes.
Yeah, that must have been.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it, until you mentioned it.
At least the other people are moving.
That's
I mean,
true.
I know they're moving looking for contact.
That's true. Yeah.
But you're stationary. They've
Yeah.
got to know where you are. And you're delivering rounds on them.
Yeah.
So, okay, but no contact at least that first
No contact there.
2 to 3
during that time.
weeks.
But then, the decision was made, it's not going to work. Just everybody be in the jungle.
They said, forget the mortars.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Interesting. So you kind of went in thinking, I'm going to be doing this mortarman role. Who knows?
I didn't know. I thought maybe a combination of both. Who knows what would happen. And I didn't ask for my MOS. They just assigned it to me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you get pulled out, and I think I remember you describing your rotation cycle as two weeks in.
Right.
And then how long would you come out?
It depended. It would be like 3 days or so in base camp out in Saigon, Benoit area. And we would get hot meals, hot showers, and we'd be able to sleep in a dormitory type room with a bed, call it a bed, and
but a roof at least.
A roof. And they actually brought in entertainment from America and also the outside. So you hear live bands and stuff like that. You could see like drive-in movies, stuff like that.
Who do you remember who you saw play live by any chance?
It was no one famous. Yeah. I heard a lot of I heard a lot of Bee Gee music.
Yep.
and Bob Dylan, and I'm surprised they would let Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
sing
that's true.
But they did, rock and roll was just really getting going, and so there was a lot of the rock and roll stuff going on.
I do remember when I was in Afghanistan, we were at a medium-sized FOB, big enough to have an airfield, but not a large airfield. And we had Toby Keith, the big country music singer,
Yeah.
come out, and I just really admired the fact that he would come
Sure.
from the main bases
Right.
to at least something like ours.
Right.
Didn't have a ton of people, but it's something when it breaks up the monotony of
Yeah.
combat operations to do something like that.
Well, one thing that just came in my head was after I'd been in combat a while, I got a call. The radioman came up to me and says, you got a call, they're going to fly you back to Saigon. I said, really? Well, how come? They didn't say. Okay. So I get flown back to Saigon, and it says, Horn, report to the airfield, they're going to fly you to Cam Ranh Bay. Okay. Another person was with me from my unit. We had no idea. We got in the chopper, and the chopper was being flown blind. He had a cover over his face. He was doing instrument flight.
Yeah. Makes you feel really good.
And I'm holy crap.
Yep.
So they fly us to Cam Ranh Bay, and then they say, okay, there's a Jeep coming for you. It's going to take you out to the airfield, whatever. We go out there. We go, what the hell? Lyndon Johnson came in. And I got to see Lyndon Johnson give us a talk.
Really?
Yeah. And then I got to spend the night on the beach at Cam Ranh Bay.
Oh, man. How long had you been in country at the time?
I would say at least 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Did you get to shake his hand, anything like that? No, you're just in the audience.
There were like 500 people or whatever. Yeah, it was a big, I guess they got, I don't know how I got picked. I had no idea.
Did they give you a new uniform or something so it looked like, no, just wore whatever you had?
Jungle fatigues, yeah.
So let's go back then. The next time you go in for your 2-week push into the field,
right?
Squad-sized element, and you're actually moving through the jungle,
right?
And so, what was that like compared to the Mortarman experience?
My first experience in the jungle was kind of. It was an out-of-body experience almost. It was like, this is beautiful, but this is dangerous.
Yeah.
And of course there were animals, there were armadillos, and there were little things that would make noise and stuff like that. And so you're always, you're so jumpy when you first get there. You just, you're not steady. You're not focused as much as you need to be.
Yeah.
You're just, like that. And that's where the beginning of anxiety starts to come, that ended up staying with me the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And literally, the mission is, I think what you
search
call
and
today,
destroy.
Movement to contact. Like your
Right.
job is to go find the enemy,
right,
and engage.
And this was an area of Vietnam where they told us, if you see anybody, they're the enemy. It's not you question them or anything else. You kill them if you see anybody.
And this is dense forest. You're not coming across villages
jungle.
out in like a farmland area.
We did have times when we came across villages, but this was my first experiences. It was, and the jungle was so thick, you could not see but 2 or 3 feet in front of you.
Is that right?
Yeah.
2 to 3 feet.
There were parts of the jungles that weren't, but my first experience, it was so thick. And so everyone carried a machete. And so you had to help, cut the vegetation away to be able to move your legs.
What type of movement formation would you go in? Because you got a squad-sized element. Were you in like a V formation? Were you in a line? How did you move?
It was a line most of the time. Most of the time it was always a line. And so there was a radioman at the end and one at the front, so they were always keeping contact with each other about how the line was going and that kind of thing.
How far would you say there was distance between men within the line?
Well, it was generally 4 or 5 feet because you never wanted to bunch up. That was a given, particularly in the jungle. I can't speak to other types of warfare, but jungle warfare, you never wanted to be together in a cluster. You were just too good of a target. And ambushes were vicious. They were waiting. They had lines of fire all the time. So you would be in crossfire anytime you came in an ambush. So you could not, if you were clustered up, you were annihilated as a cluster. So
who was the senior person in that squad-sized element? Like how much experience would they have? Was it a squad leader? Would you sometimes have a platoon sergeant?
We had platoon sergeants and we had squad leaders, and then we had a lieutenant or a captain. But I rarely ever saw somebody the rank of a captain in combat. It was mostly lieutenants, and the lieutenants rotated every 3 months. So we always had somebody new, that did more of the administration and the reporting back and stuff like that. But the seasoned veterans were the ones that in my opinion, were the leaders, whether they had the rank or didn't have the rank.
They're essentially making the decisions
That's
as you're
right.
moving.
Yeah. Unless you were told by someone of a higher power that was flying over in a chopper that you needed to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you would rotate who's at point. Is that right?
Yes, we would.
And how long would you stay up at the point? Because I would imagine that, if you're talking about the anxiety, that has to be the pinnacle of it.
It is. You would stay at point the whole patrol.
For 2 weeks?
No, for 1 day.
For a day.
So
okay.
you always at point the whole day. You never relieved. Yeah.
All right. So let's now go to the first time you were in contact.
Okay.
Essentially, could you talk through how long had you been in country and what was happening? What was it like?
Right. Been in country. I don't remember how long I was in country. I have a blank on that. Maybe that's part of the memory loss that goes. But we had walked into an ambush, and it wasn't a big unit that ambushed. It was a small unit, and so what happened was, I was back in the middle of the pack at that time, and then I heard machine gun fire, and we got notice from the radio, we're under attack, we're in an ambush. And so those of us that were in squads, we started to flank, one to the left, one to the right, from where the ambush was taking place. So we could either try to outflank the ambush or get to a safer place, basically. And so when my squad got into a position, then you make the adjustments. I hadn't learned all this. It was like by the skin of your teeth. You need to be aware of where people are in your squad. Is there someone behind you? Is there's someone out of line? Is there someone too close? All those kind of things to the enemy. All those kind of things you had to be aware of. And so I was just beginning to take all this stuff in. But the thing I did know is you wanted to get as flat to the ground as you can, and you wanted to have your weapon at the ready, and you wanted to look to see where the fire was coming from, but you also wanted to scan above you to see if there were snipers in the tree or sniper fire coming, because there was. Okay. And so one of the first things I learned is take out the snipers if you can. And so my communication with the squad that I was in, I wasn't the squad leader at that time, was, if you see a sniper, let us know. We'll all
focus on that.
Focus on the sniper. And sure enough, one of my fellow soldiers saw the sniper, and we all saw the sniper, and then it stopped. So we got the sniper.
Yeah.
And then as we moved forward, and the machine gun fire did not stop. It wasn't like they were reloading. It's like they must have had multiple machine gunners set up. And that was my first experience with the phosphorus on the end of the bullets that would come every fifth round. We had in ours too, but I'd never seen one come at me. You're seeing death on a bullet coming straight at your head on fire. And I was just like, holy shit.
It's real. So at this point,
it's real. It's real.
It has become real. Yeah.
And if I could have dug a hole with my hands, I would have, but I got as close to the ground as I could, because those rounds were just zooming by us. And so we engaged the enemy, and I would say after 10, 15 minutes in this particular, my first experience, it was over. And the enemy was gone.
Had you moved, so you hit the ground, you're focusing on the sniper, that is eliminated. You're then focusing on essentially the heavy fire, the machine guns. had you moved at all, or were you kind of still on the ground just trying to?
We had scurried
suppress?
up. We had used our elbows and stuff
Yeah.
to kind of get closer so we could get better sight. Again, one of the lessons is you don't move back, you always move forward. And so that was what we did. And we did that, as a unit. I still wasn't understanding how much danger there was behind me from my own
Yeah.
unit. And I was fortunate enough that, there wasn't anything that happened from that. But yeah.
So, I was reading a book by a former Navy SEAL who describes a fratricide incident in Iraq in 2006, but he retells a story from Vietnam of SEAL Team 1 that has fratricide in an ambush.
Yeah.
Because they have a flanking maneuver taking place, they're split, and they just lost communication effectively and ended up shooting at each other.
Yeah.
And how easy that is.
Yeah.
And as you were describing it, that was a SEAL team that had trained together and gone in. You were literally handpicked and dropped into a group of people who hadn't had a year or two of training together.
No.
So you had to learn this literally.
Yeah.
Whoever new is added to your squad.
Yeah.
How do they maneuver? How can you teach them quickly to stay online and get with the program effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it helped if you recognize that, which I did, that education's a good thing. It's a real good thing, and never underestimate the things that you learn as being superficial. You never know when you might need a bit of history, or you might need some sense of direction, or all those kind of things. And so I became a fast learner. I wasn't the only one. The ones who didn't, once again, they may have lived through the war, but I tell you, a lot of the people that I involved that didn't learn, or were unwilling to learn, didn't come home.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thinking back to the end of that first firefight, so it's 15 minutes, high intensity.
Right.
I assume you're yelling at each other to communicate.
Yeah.
As soon as that's over, what was going through your mind? Like this is your first contact that you'd had.
Right.
How did you process it?
Well, I mean, I keep bringing up this mantra thing.
Did it start there?
I started it before we went into the battle. I will survive, I will survive. I didn't know if we would have contact or not. But this was, I survived.
Yeah. So you're telling yourself that you'd done it.
Yeah. And also taking in the information, what did I miss? What wasn't I thinking about, and so forth and so on. I missed a lot that I learned later to implement into my tool chest. So, yeah.
I remember coming back from one engagement, and as a pilot, I'd land at my nice secure airfield, and I could sit in my room at night and think, you are in the field, you just have contact, you don't have that opportunity.
No.
I mean, you are now back at high alert.
Right.
You're just in contact,
That's
so I'm
right.
sure the next hour is probably even more intense. How do you put that behind you and just keep focusing on the mission?
Well, once again, I'm learning. I mean, obviously, whenever you're in a new situation, it's like learning to swim or anything else. There are perils to it and so forth. I began to understand how my body was reacting. It was starting to shut down on me. I was shaking, and it was starting to shut down on me, and I felt cramping, and my mind was buzzing, and so when we pulled back to more of a safer zone, my thoughts were, I've got to do things to help my body not overreact. What can I do? How can I do that? once again, another learning curve that I needed to learn breathing better. I needed to learn focus. Just a lot of different things at the time. What I didn't understand was that I think post-traumatic stress starts very early under traumatic circumstances, and this was a traumatic circumstances. And so the subtleties of are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, like your hypersensitivity, your vision, your hearing, all the five senses and all that kind of stuff become acute. And so I would say that I began to learn at that point, rather than have them cripple me, how could they help me? And so that's when I began to use my hearing to hear for the enemy. That's when I began to use my sight to see the enemy. That's when I began to use my breathing to not panic and to focus. And that didn't take away the anxiety. The anxiety is always there. But that helped me tone the anxiety down to where I could function and function in a productive way. I had never seen in my year in combat anyone that was a stone cold killer. Never. Go to Hollywood for that. Mm-hmm. Didn't happen in my experience in war. You sometimes came back and you cried. And after a good full minutes of crying, okay.
Yeah.
You need to do that. It just, whatever it was, whatever kind of emotions that were overwhelming you, you couldn't do it. Well, you could, but you shouldn't do it when you were in a combat live situation. You had to contain it. And then when you were able to throw up, it was a good thing. And nobody came to another person. I never did. I never saw any of my fellow soldiers come to me and say, "Oh, you're a crybaby," or or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was never a put down. It was
they just knew that's how you reset.
You got it out of your system. Good.
I guess if you then fast forward to some of the harder engagements that you found yourself in, once you had kind of finely tuned some of those senses,
right?
Maybe you could talk about some of those.
Sure.
I know that, and what I wanted to say as you were describing that, you are a psychotherapist by training.
Right.
So like when you are describing PTSD and those feelings, it comes from a lot of experience, that academically and personally.
Yeah.
It's worth noting.
Yeah.
But if we go to some of the engagements that you found yourself in, where you were more finely tuned, maybe leading some of those. I know that you were injured at one point, and that you lost. I think it was five soldiers.
There were six that were lost in various units that I belonged in. I mean, various companies that I belonged in. I was present with the majority of them that were killed.
So maybe if you could talk about one of those experiences, that one of the particularly challenging engagements you found yourself in.
We had gone to the aid of one of the companies in the 199th. I was in Echo Company. I don't remember if it was Bravo or it was Alpha, but it was one of those companies that had gotten into a serious ambush. We weren't far from them, and we were called to aid them. And so we went to them, and it was a regiment. That was
the enemy.
The enemy was a regiment. And we were maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 companies.
Were you airlifted in, or were you close enough to move through?
We were airlifted from where we were.
All right.
And we dropped in, we went up, and it was hell on earth. We called up, and there were dead soldiers, there were dead bodies, there were inexplicable sights, and the sound of explosions and the smell of gunfire and graphite and the smoke, and it was just almost overwhelming. And so fire started coming at us. I mean, it was like, we all hit the ground, and we're all spreading out. Now I'm beginning to look behind me to see if anybody's behind me. As I'm falling to the ground, I'm looking to see if I'm going to fall on an IED or a Claymore or any of those kind of things. Also, is there a red ant file nearby?
That'll do the trick. Yeah.
I don't know any of us that didn't at some point run into the red ants, and they feel like bullets, man. Holy crap. But anyway, and we're getting air support. We got choppers coming in with rockets and all this other kind of stuff that's going on, and so I'm looking to my left, I'm looking to my right, I'm looking behind me. I look to see where I fall. I see bullets coming straight at me and whizzing and so forth, and I'm looking up to see if I'm too far in the front, because if you're too far up, you're going to get hit by shrapnel from one of our rockets. They bring on the big guns from the ship, and they sound like little earthquakes. Boom! You know, and so I'm about 3 feet away from one of my buddies, and we're both like in the same position, and all of a sudden I hear this crack, and he had gotten shot right through the head. He falls backwards. His eyes are open. He's looking straight at me with open eyes. And I am just speechless. I crawl over to him and I pull him back just to get him back, because bullets were going into him even after he's totally dead. And I don't want to get too graphic here because it brings up bad memories, but his body was being torn apart by the bullets. The explosions, I can't even tell you what they look like. But anyway, so I pull him back, and then I engage the enemy and so forth. And I'm thinking, I've got to stay focused. And so I stay focused on the line of fire, and I stay focused on where I'm seeing some of my fellow soldiers, and we're all dispersed. Some I can't see because we're in the jungle, and some I can see. We're using our voices. I'm close to the, so forth, and I'm over here. My buddy just got KIA, and if we can get a medic to pull him back, whatever. And with all the bombardment that's coming in and so forth, once again, everything stops. What? Now, this is after half an hour, 30 minutes of, and that's also why part of your preparation is I carried 5 bandoleros of magazines. I'm a little guy. But man, I was using those things like you wouldn't believe. Jeez. We had M16s at the time, and fortunately mine didn't jam, but they were jammable type weapons, and I was in occasions where they did jam. But then you pull out your 45, or you grab somebody else's weapon that's been killed, and do what you have to do.
And that was it. So it was 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Fighting a regiment.
We didn't know it was a regiment until afterwards.
Of course, yeah.
And then, there was a sweep that was done, and we found this massive tunnel complex where they had a hospital and they had kitchens and they had rice from the USA.
Oh my goodness.
Had to be stolen off the docks in Saigon. Or the black market or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
I mean, you and I talked about this before, Clyde, but when I went to Vietnam 2 years ago with my dad and my brothers, and we went into some of these tunnel complexes, and it's just hard to imagine how deep these things went underground,
right,
and how resourced they were.
Right.
I mean, I think until you see like a side view diagram of it, you can't appreciate how intricate these were.
Yeah.
But to house a regiment, for instance, hospital, the ability to cook,
right,
including booby traps along the way.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. So that was probably the worst one. Even beats the one where I was wounded.
Well, please tell me about that.
Well, the one that I was wounded was again, we were coming to the aid of another company that was under fire, and there was actually a tank company that was out in the open area shooting their tanks, and so we moved up past the tanks into the jungle, and we got separated from the larger group that needed help, and the larger group, other groups that were going to aid this other group. We were kind of off to the right, and we didn't quite know which direction we needed to go in. We could hear the fire, but it was so muted with the type of jungle we were in that we just couldn't quite go left or right. We went right, and we came to some jungle that was open. I mean, you could actually see, and there was a river. It was right, and I'm not sure whether it was one of the rivers you mentioned or not. and so we were able to stand up and kind of walk, in a direction. And as we were walking, Viet Cong patrol was walking on the other side. We both stopped and saw each other, and we both hit the ground. And I saw a grenade coming straight at me. And I jumped back, and I fell into a depression that somebody...
By the grace of God,
put there.
Just happened to be there.
But my left leg was up in the air, and it got shrapnel from the grenade in the thigh. Boom. And we actually had a medic, and we returned fire, but they were gone, and so he the medic came, and he pulled the shrapnel out, and he says, "I bet that hurts." And I'm going, "You're damn straight." Burned right through my flesh. It's like a steak. He just butterflied a stitch with the needle and stuff like that, and put some gauze over, and he says, "You're good to go." And we went on.
You just kept patrolling.
Just kept patrolling. Yeah.
God. So there are two stories I recall hearing from you that I would love to dive into.
Yeah.
One, I think, is more of an unfortunate one, and you described having, I think, a platoon leader or a lieutenant with you, making what I think many people in the Army, you could go back to the Civil War or today, the mistakes of a junior officer.
Right.
And you've kind of witnessed it firsthand, if you don't mind describing
No,
that.
I don't mind describing. We went through a lot of lieutenants, and most of them were good people. They listened to the wisdom of the experienced soldiers and so forth. But we had one that came in, and he was just a cocky son of a bitch. And so we were out on a patrol. I think it was 2 or 3 squads of us, maybe a couple of squads, and we were spread out and so forth. And he was unhappy with the pace. And he says, "Blankety blank, you need to move faster. Come on, you need to move faster. God damn it!" And so, no matter what anyone said to him, he said, This is the jungle. We need to move slower. We need to be careful. We need to be looking out for them. You guys don't know what the hell you're doing, and I'm going to come up here and show you how it's done. And so he gets up, pushes the point man aside, starts walking, and silence. Radio man up front. We don't know what happened to the lieutenant.
Couldn't see him anymore.
Couldn't see him anymore. We don't know where he went. Okay, let's cautiously go search for him, spread out in two flanks, move around, let's see if we can find him. Sure enough, he'd walked stomping, fell into a punji pit. It had lethal stakes tipped with poison. They were all through his body. He was dead. We get down, pulled him up, called an evac chopper, and he went on to better things.
Yeah. It's kind of the story that you hope every lieutenant hears coming in, and they know who to go talk to. Like, they might want to push faster, but can they rely on their platoon sergeants to say, look, we've got to slow down.
Yeah.
We've been here for months. We know this, and trust them.
You know, I would say that probably every soldier needs to hear, not just the lieutenants, because there were privates that never got promoted. I don't know why they didn't get promoted, that were seasoned. And I was 3 stripes. I was a sergeant, E5. And I listened to some of these privates. They had good information. If you were a know-it-all, I mean, we're all dependent on each other to save each other.
Yeah.
To watch each other's back. You don't go, well, you're a private, you don't know anything. Are you kidding me? So yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, in terms of, some of the officers, don't be cocky.
Yeah.
It's not the place nor the time.
The other story I would love to hear from you, because it really struck me as surprising, was the use of night vision.
Yeah.
So I would like you to just tell how it came to you, but
sure.
What struck me is night vision wasn't a huge thing at the time. It must have been highly controlled who had access to it. And for your unit at a squad level to be given that probably indicates you were doing something important that necessitated that type of technology at the time.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it. But we would go out on night ambushes. A lot of times we'd fly up to the base of a jungle and there'd be an open field. It could have been defoliated, or Agent Orange, or it could have been just an open field and then the jungle starts. And so we would build sort of our bunkers and stuff, dig them out and so forth, and that's where we'd sleep at night during jungle time rather than sleeping in the jungle. Now, there were times we had to sleep in the jungle. It's just, we couldn't come out. It was just too far or whatever. And so when we were doing ambushes, we'd go out as a squad, and I was a squad leader at that time. And so my squad, we would go out and we would set up a perimeter and so forth. But really, it was not so much search and destroy as was trying to find out information. Could we hear enemy activity? Could we, see things that you need to know about and so forth and so on. Where there are water buffalo around that may come stomping into the,
Yeah.
We killed a few water buffalo by the way at night. So, so we're out one night and we all take a rotation. Doesn't matter whether you're the sergeant of the squad or not. You take a rotation. You spend, however much time you need to spend doing a watch, and then you rotate through the night. And one of the guys that's on watch comes back and he's shaking all of us in the squad. There's activity. You got to come up, there's activity. And we go up, and I was given a I didn't even know what you call it, a device.
Yeah.
And I was able to see what was out there in the dark. And it was hundreds, if not more, soldiers, Viet Cong, just walking by. I don't know, we could almost touch them. And I'm telling the squad, don't cough, don't say anything, be quiet. If you have to sneeze, hold your mouth, swallow it, whatever you need to do. And it just went on and on and on. I'm going, holy crap. Didn't want to make any noise radioing in. And after it was gone, after they didn't see us. Nobody looked our way or anything else. They were just a night. I think they traveled at night quite a bit, to be honest. Mm-hmm. They were safer. We called it in, and, we were able to get the big guns and stuff like that to hit in the area, but who knows? But I can't tell you how the experience was in terms of just wondering if anyone's going to look our way.
Yes.
If anyone can...
I can feel it right now.
Walk over and pee on us, or, whatever. It just...
Because any sound... Because realistically, they are by that time attuned to the smells of what we smell like.
That's right.
But if the radio goes off, a sneeze, anything could have
And that
been.
Reminds me, I told the radio man, turn the radio off.
Yeah. Make sure. But I would even think the click of those big buttons could have been enough.
When our guy told us, that's one of the first things I said, turn the radio off, and then we moved up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I want to transition to the post-combat experience,
Sure.
but I had two other questions briefly. One is, was there anything you took with you into combat that was like a good luck charm? I know you got the mantra, but did you carry something with you when you were in the field?
I had a gold cross that I wore, a little gold chain and a gold cross. It's my good luck piece.
Did it come from someone important?
I bought it.
It just became something?
I bought it, yeah. Yeah, I liked the way it looked.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Very simple, just a little...
Around the neck.
Around the neck, yeah. It banged, it was, next to my dog tags.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Do you still have it?
I've looked for it. I think I do.
Yeah. That's pretty
I have
good.
it in a little case, yeah.
And then the last question on the combat experience, would you look back and say that the experience you had was representative of what an American soldier experienced in that war?
Yeah.
It seems like it is, but I'm curious how you would see it.
Well, it's interesting because now that I'm around other veterans and I host a weekly breakfast with veterans, and a lot of them were in different places than I was. They weren't in jungle. They were in open areas and so forth. So some of their experiences were quite different than mine. They got mortared a lot. We didn't get mortared a lot until Tet. And they weren't in the jungle. So people don't understand that we had to do a clothes change about once a week because our fatigues were ripped to shreds from the vines and all the thorns that we came in contact with in the jungle. And sometimes we'd go through slush, just mud and gunk, and it would rot your clothes. And so we were always sending back in choppers requests to get our size clothes, and stuff like that. I've never seen that in a movie, right?
No, it doesn't look like they're all tattered.
Right, yeah. What you see is John Wayne running through the jungle as a hero, and he would have been the first one to die in the jungle warfare I was in. So it was very different, I think, in the jungle, and that's why I speak, even when I talk about my combat experience, it was jungle combat. I can't compare it to the kind of combats that were going on top of a hill or those kind of things. And the jungle changed. It was thick in places, and then it was thin in places. It was beautiful in places, and it was ugly in places, and it had its own persona too. And you learning the jungle, you had to learn not only the vegetation, all that, but the animals in the jungle and what you could expect, and you needed to understand the noises of the jungle, because if the jungle goes silent, there's something.
Yeah,
something's going
about
on.
to happen.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure we did talk about Tet, because that's such a pivotal moment in the war, especially back home, for what people saw.
Right.
If you could just describe what was that like as you were in that.
Yeah. We were brought out of the jungle to do night patrols around Benoit, Saigon area, and the main base that we were at there. And because there was rumors about there being a big force coming in, I guess it was military information or whatever. They didn't tell us a lot about it. But right before the ambush that happened at Tet, we were pulled back to the base. And we set up around some of the barracks and stuff like that, squads of us with our weapons and so forth, because there was the possibility that if there was a large force coming in from the north, that they could break through the perimeter and come into the compound. And so we were the second resistant force to meet them if they broke through the first. And so we were outside. It was night. When the attack started, there was noise everywhere. There was gunfire. There was booms of bombs, and there were choppers in the air. There was all this kind of noise. And then they blew the ammunition dump, and the sky lit up for a few seconds. It was daylight. You thought it was the end of the world.
Wow. Yeah.
And and so we weren't getting resistance, so we were told to move more up toward the front. And so what happened is we began to see, sort of like kamikaze pilots, just Viet Cong running at us just madly. And the ARVNs were amazing at that time. They were taking on the brunt of the force, and they were holding their own.
Wow.
They were knocking them back, and man, they were a fighting force at that time. And so we supported them. And but I think the thing you need to understand was that after that experience was over, and it was long. I don't even remember how long. It was all night long. And we began to do cleanup. Some of the dead bodies that we pulled back were people that worked on the base. Barbers that had cut my hair at times, other soldiers' hair, and different people that were so forth. And whether they were threatened to become part of the Viet Cong, or whether they just were and were anonymous, I don't know. But you just never knew who your enemy was.
Wow. Did you have to hold that defensive position for
all night.
And then was that it? And you kind of were able to go back to.
Well, that was it. And the good thing was we were in the base camp, so we actually got a hot meal. we
can do this again.
We had shower. Now, the showers weren't in the barrack. They were the chain pull
outside
showers, but at least they were showers
Yeah.
because the majority of the time I was in Vietnam, our showers were the monsoon rains.
Yeah.
We had a bar soap, and that was our showers. And we also soaked up our fatigues. That was our laundry.
Yeah. Man. Okay.
Yeah.
If we then transition to your life after Vietnam,
Sure.
I mean, let's talk about you coming home. What was that like?
Yeah.
Because you hear stories of people coming
Yeah.
back to really difficult
Right.
conditions.
Yeah.
Just the way the country felt at that time.
Right.
What was it like for you?
Well, we flew in a jet aircraft. It was full. It was people from all different units. It wasn't just my unit. And we flew into Oakland because that was my hometown at the time. And the Oakland Naval Base we flew into. I don't even know if it exists now. And they took us off the plane, and they gave us a new set of clothes. And they said, we don't want you dressing like a soldier. There's agitation going on in the community, and you could be attacked if you go home in military dress. They gave us a steak dinner, and then they called cabs for us, and we all took a cab to our home of residence or wherever we were. My parents were living in Berkeley at the time, and so I know.
Wow.
I know.
You're just in the infantry in Vietnam. You come back, day 2, you're in Berkeley.
And I'm in Berkeley. And although we had news reports and everything else, I had no clue how bad it was. It was bad. Berkeley was, the top of the of the rebellion going on. Yeah. And actually, after I was home, I went and watched some of the demonstrations that were going on from a distance. And I was just like flabbergasted. Was just seeing the rioting and the destruction and the property destruction and the police and the...
Yeah.
I was just like, holy crap, this is like another war.
How did you process it? I mean, were you mad?
I was befuddled. I mean, I was like, and you know what? I can't tell anyone I'm a veteran. I never told anyone I was a veteran until like 2006.
Is that right?
That's right.
Wow. What? Wow.
I kept it close to the chest. I never revealed that to anybody. There were still, even in the 2000s, there were still a lot of people that had very negative views of. Yeah. So 2006, I found out, that there was support and stuff like that, and it was in 2008 that I got into the VA and sought help and began to realize the benefits that they had, but they hadn't had when I came back.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Now when people come back, you've got a week before you're really released to just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But part of that was seeing a therapist, or some type of medical professional, to just say, how are you doing?
Right.
Did anything like that happen?
No.
You came back, did
No.
you see anybody?
No. When I came back, none of that happened, and I was sent to Boulder, Colorado, assigned to a tank unit, and did my last 6 months. To be honest, it wasn't bad. It was in the dead of winter, and I'm running around in tanks.
Yeah.
I got discharged there. But there wasn't the riots and all that. I saw it on news, things like that. Then I came back and I went immediately back to college and finish my schooling. Once again, was very reluctant to let anybody know that I'd been in the war. And I began to have rashes all over my body, particularly on my feet and so forth. And I looked up that there was a VA in LA, and I was going to college in Riverside, California, Southern California. And so I drove to the VA, and I had made an appointment, and they looked at me and said, "No, you're walking. You don't need anything. You're a walking soldier. You're okay." I said, "But these rashes, oh, they're just minor rashes. Go see an allergist or something." And and that was it. And I gave up. That was it. I said, "Well, screw the VA. They're useless," and so forth. And it wasn't until 2008 when I retired from full-time work, after going through school and doing a profession and all that kind of stuff.
As a therapist, right?
Therapist.
I mean, I think it's important.
As a therapist.
It's not like you were completely removed from psychology and dealing with trauma, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
it was trauma with children.
That's right.
That's your specialty.
I was a trauma specialist. And I was damn good at what I did.
Yeah.
The trouble is, I never understood that I had it. And that it had limited my quality of life. I just, I knew I didn't care about being around people. I was isolationist. I couldn't attach to a relationship. I still feel guilt about having relationships and just walking away from them, and the people that I left that were just like, "What happened?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand now that, I was disabled, but I had no clue. And I was functional. I was able to do work, and I was productive at my work, and I loved what I did. But I wasn't really a good person to be around when I was by myself. So I just did things by myself and, isolated, like I said, and but when I retired, I had a full-blown attack of PTSD.
Is that the final? What really showed you?
Really showed me. I have it, and I've been devastated by it, and I have held off all the memories and all the pain and the agony of it, and I've never gotten it out of my body. It's tearing my body back. I began to break down physically too, and it was in 2008 I began to have a series of heart attacks that were linked to the exposure to Agent Orange, and I was shocked because I didn't have diabetes, I didn't overeat, I didn't, I was healthy, I worked out, all that kind of stuff, and the surgeon was surprised why I would have a heart attack, and then I began to research, and I found out that there was an Agent Orange study going on, and that their ischemic heart disease, which I have, was linked to exposure to Agent Orange.
And when you said you had a full-blown PTSD attack experience, if you're okay sharing,
Sure.
What was it like a day that you experienced this? Was it just a few moments? And what was it that happened, just in case somebody else happens to have something similar and doesn't recognize it?
It began as not being able to breathe and sweat, and at night waking up in cold sweats, and horrific flashbacks. And I began to have these flashbacks of bullets coming at my head and body parts flying around me and all this horrible, terrible stuff that was going on. And I was actually back in the moment of some of the firefights I was in. I was reliving what I went through.
And that was enough for you to say, all right, I have to go seek help.
It was enough for me to understand that I had held all this in, and was quite content to say that I was a functional person. I could do my work and do good work and so forth and so on. But then I began to realize that there were soft symptoms that had been going on through the years that I was in denial about. One, I can take care of myself, kind of rationale. Two, yeah, I get, bad feelings if I hear a helicopter go overhead. Or I don't like anything to do with guns. I don't want to have violence in my life, or stuff like that. But the acute stuff that comes with the anxiety, the acute anxiety that comes with PTSD, and all of the flashbacks and the ability to attach and the intrusions. Because you could be having a great time at a party, and all of a sudden, your brain would have this intrusion of chaos and terror and claustrophobia, and I had to get out. And I would remove myself as quickly as I could. And friends began not to understand. Well, you come to a party and you're having a good time, then you just take off. What's wrong with you? Yeah. And you're no fun. We don't want to be around you. And I think, well, I don't necessarily want to be around you either. And so I knew. Then I began to know. I said, I got to get help. I got to practice what I preach. I got to get help. And I entered the VA system and began to learn. It was a tough system to navigate at the time.
Yeah.
It's much better now.
Yeah.
They're doing a much better job,
Yes.
but at the time it was tough.
So you've written these two books. I wanted to ask you a question because one of them is called PTSD in Words and Pictures. Pictures and Words.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is Veteran Guilt.
Right.
In the same, in
Pictures and Words.
Pictures and Words. Do you, especially from the therapy side of your background, do you see a difference between the two? Is there, because I had often felt like, what I have is guilt, that I am a survivor. How does it differ from PTSD?
Yeah. Well, first of all, right at the top of the list of post-traumatic stress is anger. I mean, post-traumatic stress is anxiety. It's out of control anxiety, and it's debilitating. But part of what goes into that anxiety is anger. It's anger at being powerless. It's anger at going through what you went through. It's anger at seeing the injustice of a lot of what happens around you and systems of the world, and it's anger at yourself for not being able to control. It's deep frustration that even now, in all the things you know and all your life experience, that you're still struggling to have a relationship, and that if you have a relationship and it's the best relationship in the world, it's not going well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You found the person that's the person of your dreams, and here you are screwing it up, and you can't stop it. So my first book, PTSD in Pictures and Words, I think has elements of anger in it that I express through some pictures myself, and through some words that I write. And I had thought a time or two to maybe go back and revise it from having gone through a lot of healing. But I think no, I think that can work for some people that are just, and they can take whatever they want to take from it. Veteran guilt was part of my redemption process of recognizing that it's not just survivor's guilt. It's also moral guilt. However you want to put that. I'm not putting it in a religious context as much as I am that we all have some kind of system we live by. Mm-hmm. Call it whatever you want to call it. But there's basic rules. You don't murder. You don't go out on, rampages and so forth and so on. I knew as a vet in Vietnam that I would not be part of any kind of massacre or any kind of destructive behavior toward the population. I mean, even my enemies I saw as human beings. I just never felt like you want to go to that other place where, you dehumanize somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Veteran Guilt book was my way of trying to put words to all of the dimensions that go into guilt, and maybe we need to look deeper at some of the things about that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I know you had mentioned you did not go back. You have not been back to Vietnam.
No.
But you have a really interesting story around going back to the wall. And
Yes.
I was hoping you could share that
Sure.
too, because I think
Sure.
there are probably many people like yourself who are wrestling with that.
I had talked about going to see the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. for literally decades, and just wasn't able to pull myself to go back there. My youngest son, who will be 30 soon, he had finished college and he had moved to New York to start his profession. And I had mentioned to him, it had been 50 years since I had been in Vietnam. And he...
So that's just 2 years ago, right?
yeah. And so he said, Dad, I've sent you an envelope. And in that envelope, I want you to call me when I get it, and when you get it. And so I opened the envelope, and there was a round-trip ticket to Washington, D.C., and there was reservations to a hotel. And he said, it's time you went to see the wall, and I'm going to go see the wall with you, and here's your plane reservations. We have a hotel. It's all paid for. Time to do it, Dad. Mm-hmm. And I go, gulp. I believe in symbols. Symbols are very powerful things. The symbol of the flag, the memorial symbols, they just speak to me. The wall is the symbol for me of the memories of those who lost their lives, over 58,000 people, and the names of those that I was in combat with. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I flew to Washington, and we had, I always forget the days, but 4 days or something like that there. And so we would go out in the morning, and we would start looking at some of the memorials, the White House, and went into the museums and stuff like that. And I was really having a good time. Just, wow, these are beautiful. And, the museum has such great art and all that kind of stuff. And my son found a restaurant named Clyde's that is still there.
Famous. Yeah.
It's famous. And we walked into that restaurant, and my son said, my dad's name is Clyde. And the maitre d' yells to the staff, hey, the boss is here. And they gave us a special table, and they took care of us, and it was just so much fun. And I was wearing my Vietnam veteran hat with a Purple Heart on it, and they were all just so appreciative and kind, and it was just so cool. Anyway, the last day comes. It's kind of overcast, a little misty. I've never let rain stop me for having a good time. If it rains in California, I go out, and it doesn't matter to me. And so we went out, and my son saying to me, today's the day, Dad. I go, okay.
Because you've been in D.C. for several days.
For
you had
several,
somehow
on the
avoided
last
going
day.
to the wall.
Yeah.
And now he's like, we're going.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So we start moving toward that. And we're walking. We're not taking cars or anything. We're just walking. And I'm taking photographs of memorial stuff. And, we come to the view of the Lincoln Memorial with the huge water. We walk around that. We began to see some of the memorials around where the Vietnam Memorial is, and see the World War II Memorial. Just so impressed with the reliefs and the majesty of it. And we move over to the Korean War, and I think that's one of the most impactful memorials around in Washington, D.C. Just to see the soldiers in a field and the eyes and the backpack. You can see the trauma in their bodies and their eyes while they're doing patrols and stuff. Just phenomenal memorial. Walk past the Lincoln Memorial, and then there's a pathway that walks around to the Vietnam Memorial, which is dropped, and then there's a long marble wall, or whatever it is, granite, I think. And so we start walking. There's a little drizzle, but it stopped. We kind of curve down, and I see the wall just laid out, glycerine. And I collapse in my son's arms, and I just sob and cry. I don't know how long. He just held me, tell me it's okay. I need to get it out. This is good for you, Dad. This is a wonderful thing for you to be able to. And so we walk down. Right before you get to the Vietnam Memorial, there are 3 soldiers that are called the Guardians. They're called the 3 soldiers, I think, but anyway, they kind of look toward the memorial. And they represent the 3 races, the majority 3 races in Vietnam. African American, Mexican American, and Caucasian. And they're just gorgeous. And they're taking my breath away. It's just powerful images. And we go from there to walking down the memorial, and there's a woman ranger that had been watching me and my son. I don't know how she knew. I'm sure she's seen hundreds and thousands of veterans come to the memorial, but she just waits for us. And she says, I'll help you. And I tell her I have 6 names of soldiers that died in battle with me, and I brought some paper to etch a name. She says, no need. I have papers here for you, and we're going to put them in nice envelopes, and we're going to get those names etched for you. I can't do the etchings. She gives my son the crayon or whatever they use for the etching, and she has this huge book, and she's looking up all the names, and so she points them out to us, but she's just so kind. And the last name is too high on the wall. She says she's going to get the ranger says she's going to get a ladder, and she's going to go up and etch it for us. That, we're not allowed to climb on the ladder. So she does that. She brings it down. She hands me the packet of the 6 etchings, and beautiful presentation of how she had put them in these envelopes and stuff. And I opened up my backpack and I put them in my backpack. And right after I zip up my backpack, it begins to pour rain and there's a thunderstorm. And I don't know whether it was me or my son who said it, but it was like, I think it was me, but I'm not sure. The tears of God. And the ranger says to us, we couldn't have etched the names if it was raining like this.
Wow. On your last day.
On the last day. It was the most powerful experience of my life to have that happen. And I got my son to take a picture of me with my hand on the wall, which I have.
I've seen it.
Oh, have you seen
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Yeah.
That's special.
Yeah.
I guess, sorry.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. The question I have after all we've talked about, and so you left college, went in to serve voluntarily, spent that year of hell, came back, dealt with effectively pretty significant PTSD for 40 years before being treated, and then managed it since. Right. So difficult, you didn't want to go, let alone to the wall or even the country where it took place.
Right.
But knowing all of that, if you could go back to yourself when you were signing up, would you have done it any differently?
In a second.
You do it again?
In a second.
Yeah.
I would never.
It's amazing.
Not. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would go now if they called me, if they needed me.
Yeah.
I would. I believe in freedom and democracy, and I know everyone's saying the world's screwed up and so forth, and America's in a mess. But I don't think anyone understands freedom like soldiers. We put our lives on the line, and I literally mean our lives. And freedom is not a word, and it's not the ability to just do any fucking thing you want to do. It is respect, and it is honor, and it is dedication to a place where we can have free expression, free beliefs, and free sexuality, places where people are hung for some of the things that we allow in America. And I think understanding that takes tremendous effort to keep into place. And there are countries right now waiting to take us over if we let them. They want us to spit on the flag. They want us to not care about our freedom and say that other countries are better than our country. They're not. I've lived all over the world. And I'm sorry, I'm a patriot, and I don't apologize for it.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Well, I'm super appreciative of your time and being so open about it. And I know you've written about it before, but just to talk about it with me is very special. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
I hope you enjoyed this combat story. If you want to tell your own story, go to combatstory.com. If you know someone we should interview, send me their info at ryan@combatstory.com. Hearing these stories can be tough or bring back your own memories. If you're battling PTSD, please call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255. 273-8255. Stay safe.